The winter sun was gentle that afternoon, casting a golden glow over the public park in Delhi. The air carried the sound of rustling leaves, the occasional laugh of children chasing each other, and the distant hum of city life. On a wooden bench, worn smooth from years of use, a man in a simple kurta sat quietly, watching a pair of sparrows hop between fallen leaves. His face was familiar to millions, but here, in this quiet corner, he looked like just another man, enjoying a peaceful moment. A few minutes later, another figure entered the park. He walked with a calm and thoughtful pace, his dark jacket slightly open, revealing a light shirt beneath. His eyes searched the benches, and when he spotted the man in the kurta, his lips curved into a warm smile. It was Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, who had come to meet the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. The meeting was informal. There were no flashing cameras, no microphones, no crowd of reporters. Sundar greeted Modi with a respectful nod, and Modi patted the bench beside him. "Please, sit," Modi said softly. They sat side by side, the afternoon light painting gentle shadows on their faces. For a moment, they did not speak. The silence was not awkward. It was the silence of two men who understood the value of stillness in a world that never stopped moving. After a while, Sundar spoke. "It's been years since I last sat in a public park without a schedule pushing me forward," he said, looking around at the trees swaying gently. "It feels different, grounding." Modi's eyes stayed on a group of school children playing cricket in the distance. "Sometimes we forget how much wisdom there is in ordinary moments," he replied. "Life is not only about big decisions, it's also about small pauses." As they spoke, an elderly man shuffled slowly along the path. His coat was worn and patched at the elbows, his shoes barely holding together. His eyes, though tired, were sharp and searching. In his trembling hands, he carried a small, folded letter. He stopped a few feet away from the bench, hesitating as if unsure whether to approach. Sundar noticed first. "Sir, do you need help?" he asked gently. The old man's voice was quiet but steady. I have something that must be read by the two of you. It is important." Modi looked at him closely. "Please, sit with us." The man lowered himself carefully onto the far edge of the bench. His hands shook as he held out the letter. The paper yellowed and creased as though it had been folded and unfolded many times. Modi took it first, glancing at Sundar before carefully opening it. The handwriting inside was uneven, but strong. The first lines made both men pause. "To whoever receives this, if you are reading, it means you are in a position to change something in this country. My name is Rahim Das. I was a school for 40 years. I believed in the power of education, in the promise that every child, rich or poor, could have a chance to dream. But something happened that took away my faith." The words stopped there, as though the writer had paused mid-thought, before continuing on the next page. Sundar leaned closer to read, his brow furrowed. Modi's grip on the paper tightened ever so slightly. The old man's voice broke the silence. "I have carried this letter for more than a year. I have tried to give it to someone who could listen, but no one had the time. I am tired of walking these streets with it in my pocket. I thought today might be my last chance." His tone was not desperate, but there was a weight in his words that pressed on both men. Modi looked at Sundar, then back at the man. "We will listen," he said quietly. "We will listen to every word." The old man nodded once, his eyes glistening. "Then let me tell you why I wrote this letter, and what it cost me." As he began to speak, the sound of the park faded away. The laughter of children, the rustle of leaves, even the warmth of the sun seemed to fall back, replaced by the heavy pull of his story. And in that moment, neither Modi nor Sundar knew that the words they were about to hear would lead them into a journey they could not have imagined, a journey that would test their patience, their resolve, and their belief in the goodness of people. The old man's voice was low, but each word carried the weight of a memory that had never faded. I taught in a small village school, he began, a place where the walls were cracked. The roof leaked during the rains, and the blackboard had more scratches than smooth surface. But the children, they came every day, with eyes bright and eager to learn. Some walked for an hour from nearby villages, barefoot, carrying nothing but a slate and a dream. Modi and Sundar listened, without interrupting. The park around them seemed to slow down, the noise softening into the background. There was one boy, Rahim continued. His name was Anil. He was thin, always a little hungry, but quick to understand everything I taught. I used to tell him, one day, you will become an engineer or a scientist. His face would light up every time. Rahim's eyes shifted toward the ground, his hands tightening on his knees. Then came a day that changed everything. The government had sent inspectors to check on the school. They came in expensive cars, wearing fine clothes. They stayed for less than an hour, but in that hour, they decided our school would be closed. They said it did not meet the standards. Sundar frowned slightly. But what happened to the children? They were told to go to a bigger school in the city, Rahim replied, his voice growing heavier. But for many families, that was impossible. The city was far. Transport cost money they didn't have. Most of the children stopped going to school altogether. Anil was one of them. A faint breeze stirred the leaves above their heads. But the air felt colder now. I fought, Rahim went on, his voice trembling with both anger and sorrow. I wrote letters to the district office, to the education board. I even went to the city to meet the officials. They all said they would look into it, but nothing happened. Months passed. One day, I heard that Anil had started working at a roadside tea stall. I went to see him. He smiled when he saw me, but there was something in his eyes, something broken. He said, "Sir, I wanted to study, but we cannot eat dreams." Rahim's shoulders sagged, as though the weight of that sentence had been pressing on him, ever since. That was the day I began writing this letter. I wanted anyone who could make a difference to read it. But I did not want it to be just a complaint. I wanted it to be a reminder that education is not charity. It is the foundation of everything. Modi's expression was unreadable, but his eyes were steady, focused entirely on the old man. Sundar sat with his fingers interlaced, his thoughts racing. I have seen children with potential greater than anything in my time, Rahim continued, but their spark fades when they are left with no tools to shape their future. If people like you do not see them, they will disappear into the crowd, unnoticed, unheard. The words hung in the air, heavy and still. Finally, Modi asked softly, "Rahim ji, why today? Why bring this letter to us here, in this park?" Rahim's eyes met his, and for a moment, the old man looked almost young again, his gaze sharp with urgency. "Because I heard you were meeting here," he said. "Because I believe that in this moment, if I give up, I will carry regret to my grave. I wanted to look into the eyes of two men who have the power to change things, and ask, will you let another Anil be forgotten?" A deep silence followed. Sundar's eyes shifted to Modi, searching for a response, but Modi remained still, his thoughts hidden. And then, before anyone could speak, a young boy's voice called from somewhere in the park, "Dadaji." All three turned to see a boy of about 12 running toward them. His clothes were dusty, and his hair messy, but his face was lit with a smile. Rahim stood slowly, his own expression softening. The boy reached him, slightly out of breath. "I finished the delivery," he said proudly, holding up an empty cloth bag. Modi and Sundar exchanged a glance. Something in the way the boy stood close to Rahim, the way Rahim placed a protective hand on his shoulder, told them there was more to this story than they had heard so far. "This is Arjun," Rahim said quietly. "He is why I still fight. But his time is running out, 2. Arjun looked at the two men with wide, curious eyes. He did not know who they were, but he sensed that this meeting was important. Sundar smiled at him gently, while Modi's gaze softened in the way it did when he spoke to children in small towns during his travels. Rahim placed a hand on the boy's back. Arjun helps me sell tea in the mornings, he explained. In the afternoons, he sometimes goes to a small private tutor. But the fees, they are becoming too much. I fear soon he will stop going altogether, just like Anil. Arjun lowered his head slightly, as if embarrassed. I like studying, he said in a quiet voice. But if I don't help, we will not have enough money. The words pierced the air. Modi leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. Arjun, he said softly, what do you want to be when you grow up? The boy hesitated, then spoke with quiet certainty. An engineer. I want to build bridges and roads, so people in villages don't have to walk through mud to get to school. Sundar's eyes flickered with something unspoken. He knew the feeling of having dreams larger than the world around you. That is a very good dream, he said, and you must not give it up. But Arjun only shrugged, as if he had already begun to accept that dreams were not always for people like him. Rahim reached into his pocket and took out a small, folded photograph. He handed it to Modi. It showed a group of children standing outside a crumbling school building. Most of them were smiling despite the broken walls and peeling paint. In the corner stood a young Anil, barely recognizable from the boy Rahim had described, holding a small book close to his chest. This was the last picture taken before the school closed, Rahim said. I keep it to remind me what was lost that day. As Modi studied the photo, the sound of the city beyond the park seemed to fade even more. He could see in the children's faces not just innocence, but hope, a hope that had been quietly taken away. Sundar broke the silence. Rahim ji, may I ask, why not take this story to a newspaper or social media? It might reach many people. The old man gave a small, tired smile. I have tried. Some reporters came, wrote a few lines, and then moved on to the next story. The noise of the world is too loud for people like us. I need someone who will not just hear me, but act. There was something about the way Rahim spoke, steady, unshaken, made his words impossible to dismiss. Arjun, who had been silent, suddenly spoke again. Dadaji says, if we can fix one school, maybe others will follow. He looked between Modi and Sundar, his voice almost pleading. Can you fix it? For a moment, neither man answered. Modi's mind was already moving, weighing the possibilities, thinking of policies, resources, and the barriers that always stood in the way. Sundar was thinking in a different way about technology, about connecting remote places to opportunities without making children leave their homes. Just then, the sound of a bicycle bell rang nearby. A young man rode past, but as he did, something slipped from his pocket and fell onto the path. It was a small, brown envelope. Arjun ran to pick it up, calling after the cyclist, but the man didn't hear him and kept riding away. Arjun returned to the bench, holding the envelope. It was unsealed, and curiosity got the better of him. He opened it slightly and saw a thin stack of old, faded notes, money, but there was also a folded slip of paper. Rahim looked at it in surprise. Read it, he told Arjun. The boy unfolded the note and read aloud, his voice trembling. To whoever finds this, use it to help a child stay in school. I once had a teacher who changed my life, but I never got to thank him. Maybe this is my way. The three men exchanged stunned glances. The park around them, once just an ordinary setting for an afternoon meeting, now felt like it had turned into the center of something strange, almost destined. Rahim's voice was almost a whisper. Do you believe in signs? Modi looked at him steadily. Sometimes, he said. But more than signs, I believe in taking the first step. And with that, an unspoken understanding settled between the four of them that this meeting, this letter, and even this found envelope were no accident. The envelope lay on the bench between them, its edges worn, the paper inside still holding the faint scent of age and dust. Arjun stared at it, as if it were something magical, a doorway to a different kind of future. Sundar reached out and gently picked it up, holding it with care. "How much do you think is in here?" Sundar asked softly. Rahim shook his head. "It does not matter. What matters is the thought. Someone left this for a child they will never meet. It is rare to see such kindness without expectation." Modi studied the old note in Arjun's hands. "Do you know what this means, Arjun?" he asked. The boy hesitated. "That there are people who care, even if they don't know you?" "Yes," Modi replied. "And it also means something else. It means that, sometimes, change begins with something small. One act, one decision." Rahim sat quietly for a moment before speaking. "This is enough to cover a few months of Arjun's tutor fees. But I do not want to use it for just that. If this is truly a sign, it must be the seed for something bigger." Sundar's mind began working in the way it always did when faced with a challenge. "Rahim ji, tell me, if you could rebuild your old school, what would it need?" Rahim looked almost startled by the question. "Walls that keep out the rain, books for every child, desks, and most of all, teachers who care more for the children than for their salary." Sundar smiled faintly. "And if children in nearby villages could also learn from home, through a small device connected to the internet." Rahim blinked at him. "It sounds like a dream." "Then maybe," Sundar said, "we should try to make it real." Modi listened quietly. In his years of public service, he had seen many ideas start with passion but fade because no one took the first step. But here, in this small park, with an old man, a boy, and one envelope of money, he felt something different, something personal. "Rahim ji," Modi said slowly, "there is a program for rural schools. It moves slowly, but it exists. If we can combine it with Sundar's technology, maybe we can make your village a model for others." Arjun's eyes lit up for the first time that afternoon. "So, you will do it?" he asked, almost afraid to believe. "We will try," Modi answered firmly. "But it will take time, and we will need help." Before anyone could respond, a group of children ran past, laughing loudly as they chased a ball. The ball rolled to a stop near the bench. Arjun picked it up and tossed it back, smiling a little. Rahim watched him. "Every child deserves that smile," he murmured. Just then, a shadow fell over the bench. A middle-aged woman stood there, looking at Rahim with sharp, searching eyes. She wore a faded sari, her hands gripping the strap of a worn bag. "Rahim, bye," she asked cautiously. Rahim looked up in surprise. "Mira, is that you?" The woman nodded slowly. "I heard you were still fighting for the school. I have something you need to see." From her bag, she pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Her hands trembled slightly as she passed it to him. Rahim opened it, and as his eyes moved across the page, his face changed first confusion, then shock. "This," he said, his voice uneven. "This is proof that the school was never meant to be closed. It was a mistake in the report. They shut it down for no reason." Sundar leaned closer to read, while Modi's eyes narrowed. The paper carried an official stamp, and the lines were clear. The inspection that had doomed the school was marked incomplete due to insufficient data. "Rahim ji," Modi said slowly, "this means we can fight this not just with emotion, but with truth." The park felt different now. The air seemed to carry a pulse of possibility, and Arjun, standing beside his grandfather, whispered as if speaking to himself, maybe the dream is still alive." Rahim held the paper, as if it might vanish if he loosened his grip. The stamp, the signatures, the blunt words, they were not just ink on paper. They were a weapon, the kind he had never thought he would hold. Meera sat down on the edge of the bench, still catching her breath. "I found it by chance," she explained. My cousin works in the district office. He was cleaning out old files when he saw my village's name. When he read it, he knew I would want it. Sundar studied the document closely. This is clear evidence, he said. But why didn't anyone act on it? Mira gave a bitter laugh, because nobody cared. And those who could have fixed it found it easier to stay quiet. Modi's voice was calm, but carried an edge of steel. Then we will not stay quiet. Rahim looked from Modi to Sundar, almost afraid to hope. Do you really mean to take this further? Modi met his gaze. Yes, but we must be smart. If we simply shout, they will ignore us again. We must bring this to the right table, with the right people watching. Sundar nodded. And while that happens, we can begin laying the groundwork for something bigger. Even if the school reopens, we can't let it fall back into the same state. It must become an example. Arjun's eyes moved between them, trying to keep up. So, we're going to win. Modi smiled faintly. Winning is not just about proving a mistake. It's about building something better after. Rahim's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. I have spent years carrying this letter, believing someone might listen. But now it feels like the letter is not enough. There is more to be done. Sundar leaned forward. Then let's start today. Tell me everything about the village, children, the families, what they need most. As Rahim spoke, the picture became clear. Many families relied on their children to work, even part-time, to survive. Others had moved away, seeking better chances in towns. The ones who stayed often lacked the money for uniforms, books, or transportation. Modi listened, mentally noting each barrier. We can address some of these with policy, he said, but others will need direct action. Sundar, could we create a pilot program, something quick, to show results before the paperwork slows us down? Sundar thought for a moment. Yes, we can set up a small digital learning hub in the village. Low cost, solar powered, with offline lessons for when internet is weak. If we start with 20 devices, we can reach most of the children. Arjun's face lit up at the thought, but then he frowned. What if they still have to work? They won't have time to use it. Rahim placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we will work with the families too. Education must feel like an investment, not a loss. Mira stood, her voice firm. I can help talk to them. They know me. They will listen if they believe this time is different. As the plan began to take shape, the sound of footsteps approached. A young man in a formal shirt and trousers stopped in front of them, holding a phone in his hand. He looked uncertain. Excuse me, he said. Are you Rahim, sir? Rahim looked up in surprise. Yes, I am. The young man smiled faintly. You probably don't remember me. My name is Amit. I was in your class, years ago. I heard from someone in the market that you were here, and I wanted to thank you. Because of you, I didn't drop out. I'm now working as a junior engineer. Rahim stared at him, stunned. Amit, you were the boy who used to draw bridges in the back of your notebook. Amit laughed softly. And now I get to build them. But sir, if you're fighting for the school, I want to help. Tell me what you need. The moment was like a thread connecting past, present, and future. A boy once saved by education had returned as a man ready to protect it for others. Modi looked at Sundar, then at Rahim. This is how change happens, one person at a time, until there are enough to move a mountain. Rahim's eyes shone, but he only said, then let us begin moving it. The next morning, the park felt different when Rahim arrived. Sunlight poured through the trees in soft beams, and the air held a quiet expectancy. Sundar was already there, speaking on his phone, while Modi sat with a small notebook, writing something in neat lines. Arjun followed closely behind his grandfather, clutching the brown envelope they had found. Mira joined them a few minutes later, carrying a thermos of tea and a cloth bag filled with papers. Today, Modi said as they gathered, we take the first step. I have arranged a meeting with the district education officer. We will present the evidence Mira brought, along with our plan. But we will not go alone. We will bring voices, parents, former students, anyone willing to speak. Rahim nodded. I can gather them. People trust me. Sundar closed his phone call and looked at Modi. I've also spoken to a few contacts in the education technology space. They are ready to provide the first 20 devices for the learning hub, free of cost, if we can show proof that the program will be supported long-term. Arjun's eyes went wide. So the children will really get to learn like in big schools? Sundar smiled. Yes, but they will also learn from each other, and from the people who care about them. Mira poured tea into small cups, her hands steady, despite the excitement in the air. I have already spoken to a few families. Some are cautious, but many are ready to send their children back, if they believe it will last this time. Modi closed his notebook. Then we will make sure it lasts. The hours that followed were filled with calls, handwritten notes, and quiet conversations under the shade of the park trees. Amit, the young engineer, arrived with 2 more former students, both now working in nearby towns. They had taken the day off to stand with their old teacher. By afternoon, a small group stood ready outside the district office. Rahim held the document like a shield, while Sundar carried a simple printed plan for the learning hub. Modi walked beside them, his presence quiet but firm. Inside, the meeting was tense at first. The officer listened without expression as Rahim spoke of the school's closure, of children forced to give up their dreams, of the mistakes buried in files. Mira laid the document on the desk, pointing to the official stamp and signatures. Sundar explained the pilot program, his voice calm but filled with conviction. This is not charity, he said. It is an investment. If we succeed here, it can be repeated across hundreds of villages. The officer leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against the desk. You are asking for a lot of resources. Modi met his eyes. We are asking for what was already theirs. There was a long pause. Then the officer sighed. The paperwork will take time, but I cannot ignore this evidence. The school will be reopened for a trial period of 1 year. After that, if results are strong, it will remain open permanently. Relief washed over the group, but there was no cheering. The quiet satisfaction of knowing the door had been pushed open. Weeks later, the village school stood alive again. The cracked walls were repaired, the roof patched, new books stacked in the small library. The digital learning hub hummed softly in one corner, solar panels catching the sun. On the first day, Arjun walked into the classroom with a smile so wide, it almost hurt to see. He sat in the front row, his slate replaced by a small tablet. His eyes fixed on the teacher, with the same brightness Rahim had once seen in A&L. As the children settled, Rahim stood at the doorway, his hands folded behind his back. Soon, Hers stood beside him, watching the screens light up. Modi arrived quietly, stepping into the classroom without ceremony. Arjun looked up and whispered to his grandfather, "We did it." Rahim's eyes glistened. "No," he said softly, "we started it." Because the truth was clear to them, all the real work was just beginning. Months passed, and the school began to feel alive in a way that no one in the village had seen for years. Children who had once spent their days carrying water or working in fields now carried books in their hands and stories in their voices. The air around the schoolyard was filled with the sound of laughter, questions, and the steady rhythm of learning. Arjun had become one of the brightest students in his class. He worked hard, often staying after school to help younger children learn how to use the tablets. If they can learn faster, he told Rahim one day, maybe they won't lose time like I did. Rahim smiled at him, proud, but also deeply aware of how fragile this progress was. He spent his mornings teaching, his afternoons meeting with parents, and his evenings writing updates to Sundar and Modi about the school's needs. Sundar, though far away, visited whenever he could. Each time, he brought new ideas, more offline lessons, interactive science kits, and even a program to connect the children with mentors in other cities. He often told them, "Your village may be small, but your future is not." Modi kept his promise as well. He ensured the district office received regular reports about the school's improvement, and whenever he traveled nearby, he stopped to visit, sitting with the children, listening to their questions, and telling them stories of people who had changed their lives through perseverance. But change did not come without challenge. Some families still hesitated, afraid that schooling would take their children away from the fields forever. One evening, after a long day, Mira came to Rahim's house. "Two children have stopped coming," she said. "Their father says there is no use in learning. He needs them to work." Rahim did not waste time. The next morning, he walked to the man's home. He found the children carrying sacks of grain. The father looked up warily as Rahim approached. "I am not here to argue," Rahim said gently. "I am here to ask you one thing. If they work now, they will help you for a season. If they learn, they may help you for a lifetime. Which do you want?" The man did not answer right away, but days later, the children returned to class. By the end of the year, something remarkable had happened. The test scores from the village school were among the highest in the district. Parents who had once doubted the program now spoke proudly of their children's progress. The district officer, the same man who had once doubted the idea, visited the school and admitted, "I was wrong to think this would fail." One sunny afternoon, the entire village gathered for a small ceremony. The school had officially been granted permanent status. Garlands hung over the doorway, and the walls were freshly painted. On the front bench sat Rahim, Sundar, and Modi. In the crowd were former students like Ahmet, who had returned to see the school thrive. Children recited poems, sang songs, and spoke about their dreams: doctors, scientists, engineers, teachers. When it was Arjun's turn, he stood at the front, holding the same brown envelope they had found in the park months earlier. "This is where it began," he said, his voice steady. "Someone believed in helping a child they didn't know. That one act made others believe too. I promise that one day, I will do the same for another child." The crowd was silent for a moment, then broke into applause. Rahim looked at Sundar and Modi, his voice low but filled with gratitude. "You didn't just save a school. You gave them back their future." Modi shook his head. "No, Rahim ji, you carried the spark. We only helped it catch fire." As the ceremony ended and the sun began to set, the three men sat quietly, watching the children run across the schoolyard. The sound of their laughter carried into the distance, a sound that would remain even after the day was gone.